Hi, I'm Celeste. My husband used to say I was his decoration. He chose my clothes, my words, even when I could speak. While he smiled for the cameras, he was stealing millions, using our son's name to hide it. For years, I thought silence kept me safe, until I learned it only protected him. Now he sits in court, trembling, signing back every stolen dollar, one shaky signature at a time. But tell me, what would you do if the man you loved built your life on a lie? Before we dive in, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. I want to know who's out there, still brave enough to break their own silence. Morning sunlight slid across the glass walls, spilling warmth on the marble floor. Everything in our house gleamed, the kind of perfection that made visitors whisper. "It looks like a magazine," they'd say. But for me, it was more like standing inside a picture frame. Everything was still, curated, and airless. Graham loved order. The furniture matched his suits, precise, expensive, soulless. Even the curtains seemed afraid to move. He once told me, "People trust us because we look like success." Us. But really, he meant him. I was there to complete the image, the finishing touch. That morning, I was setting the table when he walked in. "The napkins," he said, his tone as smooth as the granite countertop. "They should be ivory, not cream. Cream looks lazy." I hesitated, looking down at the fabric in my hands. "They're close enough, aren't they?" He smiled, that thin, polite smile that meant stop talking. "Details are what keep people believing, Celeste." Then he leaned in and brushed his lips against my forehead. "Don't forget to smile for the investors tonight." He said it gently, like a husband giving a reminder, but I could feel the leash in his words. I nodded. That's what I did best. Agree, nod, make everything easier. After he left, I poured myself coffee. The air smelled like roasted beans and quiet resignation. The cup he liked, white porcelain with a faint gold rim, sat near the sink. When I picked it up, my reflection bent across its surface, flawless, distorted. He came back briefly, jacket half-buttoned, phone to his ear. Without pausing his call, he reached for the pot, poured, and handed me a filled cup. "Don't spill it, my decoration. You always make a mess." He said it with that same performative affection people use with pets. The word stuck to me, heavy and sharp. I smiled because that's what he expected, but my hand trembled. Later, after he left again, I saw a hairline crack running down the side of that cup. A small fracture no one would notice but me. I traced it with my thumb, wondering how long it had been there. The day moved like a long exhale. I cleaned, replied to messages from his assistant, and made sure the flowers in the foyer matched the dinner theme. Ivory. Elegance. He liked things consistent, predictable. It was his way of controlling the chaos he created elsewhere. By evening, the house transformed into a stage. The chandeliers glowed soft amber, jazz hummed from the speakers, and people in suits filled every inch of the open room. Laughter and compliments floated around Graham like perfume. He looked magnetic, the perfect host, shaking hands, patting backs, toasting success. When he introduced me, he placed his hand on my back, a guiding pressure that looked affectionate but reminded me who was in charge. "This is Celeste," he told a group of donors. "My best choice. She makes everything look effortless." The women smiled, the men nodded approvingly. One woman leaned toward me and whispered, "You're so lucky to have a man like him." I smiled. "Luck's just another word for silence." She laughed, thinking I was being clever. But inside, something shifted. Small, like the crack in the porcelain cup. As the night carried on, I kept my role. I laughed when expected, listened when required, and smiled until my cheeks ached. the scent of champagne mixed with the faint metallic chill of exhaustion. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else. Then, on my way back from the kitchen, I caught Graham's voice near the study. His tone dropped, quieter, harder. "Don't worry," he said to a man I recognized, Calder, his business partner. "The fund's moving faster than expected. I'll shift the accounts tonight." I paused in the hallway, the laughter from the main room echoing behind me. My fingers tightened around the serving tray. Shift the accounts. I didn't know what it meant, but the words sounded wrong, dangerous. A guest walked past me, smiling. I smiled back automatically, my pulse thudding. When I looked again toward the study, the door had closed. The rest of the evening blurred, the endless small talk, the speeches, the polite applause. By midnight, the last guest's car lights disappeared through the gate, and the house exhaled into silence. I gathered plates, stacked glasses, wiped fingerprints from the counter. Through the wide glass wall, my reflection looked like part of the architecture, a figure framed by the world Graham built. Beautiful, still, alone. "He said I was his decoration," I whispered to the empty room. "Maybe that's why he built a glass house, so everyone could see me, but no one could hear me." Outside, the pool shimmered under the security lights, calm and sterile. Somewhere upstairs, his office screen flickered. A small notification blinked once, twice. That night, a single email notification blinked on his office screen, and I shouldn't have seen it. The soft glow of the hallway light spilled under the office door, a faint reminder of the one room in the house that never truly slept. I had meant to walk past it. Really, I had. But something made me stop. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was the silence, too loud to ignore. I wasn't supposed to be in his office. That was made clear long ago. But as I reached for the doorknob, I told myself it was just a glance, just a peek. I'd say I was looking for the insurance folder. That usually worked. The door creaked slightly, and I winced, waiting. Nothing. The house was still, except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional settling creak in the walls. I stepped inside, barefoot, careful. His computer screen was still on. An email was open, hovering in the draft folder. The subject line alone made my stomach tighten. Voss Fund Transfer, Phase Thra. My fingers hovered above the mouse. I could leave, I should leave. But I didn't. I clicked. The email wasn't addressed to anyone yet. No greeting, just attachments, spreadsheets, and scanned documents. I clicked through them slowly, each one worse than the last. The names on the wire transfers were painfully familiar. The Carters, the Lees, the old couple down the street who sent us homemade jam every Christmas. But the account names, they weren't Graham's. They weren't even under the business. They were under Eli's. Our son's name sat at the top of every bank statement. Cayman Islands, multiple accounts. He didn't just steal, he hid it all under the name of a child who still believed his father was a hero. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My breath locked in my chest as my fingers dug into the armrest of his leather chair. The silence around me grew heavy, pressing down like a secret about to burst. I grabbed my phone, snapped a picture of the screen, then immediately deleted it. Even the sound of the shutter seemed too loud. I wiped the phone clean like I was scrubbing a crime scene. The floor creaked behind me. I turned slowly. Graham stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, eyes unreadable. "What are you doing in here?" I swallowed. "Looking for the insurance folder." He didn't move, just stared, long enough for my skin to crawl. Then he smiled, the same smile he used at galas and board meetings. "Next time, ask." He crossed the room, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out like nothing had happened. But as he passed, he said it. Quiet, casual, lethal. Curiosity ruins beautiful things. That was his way. Sweet words with blades hidden behind them. I waited until I heard his footsteps on the stairs before I moved again. My legs shook as I left the office, locking the door behind me like that would seal the truth inside. Upstairs, I went straight to the bathroom and shut the door. My reflection looked older, not in years, but in weight, in knowing. My fingers gripped the edge of the sink as I whispered to no one. He used Eli's name. He used my silence. He's using everything. I thought about going to the police, but then I remembered the mayor shaking his hand at last month's fundraiser. I remembered how easily Graham's company sponsored local events, paid for school uniforms, donated to church repairs. Everyone thought they owed him something. No one would believe me. Not the woman who smiled at dinners, not the decoration. By the time the sun started bleeding through the blinds, I had washed my face twice and still couldn't get the look off, the one that knew too much. At dinner that night, Graham acted like everything was fine, like I hadn't been caught snooping. He passed the salad, asked about the garden renovations, and complimented the lamb I had reheated from the night before. Then, mid-sentence, he said, "A reporter called today." I paused, fork in hand. If they ask, you don't know anything. Just smile and say you don't handle the business. I nodded once, pressing my fork into the lettuce until it tore. Inside, something shifted. Not panic, not fear. Readiness. I wasn't ready before, but I was getting there. I watched him laugh at something on his phone and thought, the next time I smile, it won't be for him. It'll be for the camera that buries him. Later that night, after Eli brushed his teeth and climbed into bed, I tucked the blankets around him and kissed his forehead. His room smelled like the baby shampoo he still insisted on using. He looked up at me with those same clear blue eyes. "Mom," he asked, "why did Dad put my name on the business papers?" I paused, still leaning over Eli's bed, my hand on his blanket. That question, so casual, so small, hit me harder than any document or whispered threat. I looked at his face, soft and trusting, waiting for an answer I couldn't give. "You shouldn't worry about those papers, sweetheart," I said, smoothing his hair. "That's grown-up stuff." He shrugged, turned to his side, and pulled the covers up. "Okay." I kissed his forehead and turned off the lamp. As I walked down the hallway, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't just about being a wife trying to survive her husband's control. I had a son, and he had a name his father was using like a credit card with no limit. The fear was still there, but something colder had started growing underneath it. Resolve. The next morning, I watched Graham move through the kitchen, phone glued to his ear, one hand casually stirring his coffee. He didn't say good morning. He didn't look at me. He just said, "Edison needs phase 3 by Friday. Keep her out of it." He slipped his AirPods in before finishing the sentence, then turned and left without another word. The front door closed with a soft, final click. I stood by the sink, letting the water run over a spoon I didn't need to clean, trying to act normal. That name, Edison, I'd heard it before. Always in whispers, always just as I walked into a room. And phase 3? I didn't know what the other 2 phases were, but I had a sick feeling they were sitting under my roof. So I started a new routine. I'd write grocery lists, just like always, but mixed in with avocados and toothpaste were little notes only I could decipher. Check storage unit, backup drive, call Judith. They looked innocent to anyone else, but to me they were instructions, a quiet rebellion. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was gathering proof. Truth didn't make noise, but it added up. That afternoon, I walked 2 doors down with a loaf of banana bread and a lie. Judith Lang answered in her usual warm way, flour on her apron, the smell of cinnamon in the air. She invited me in before I could ask. Judith was older, maybe in her late 60s, with the kind of steady eyes that made you want to confess, even if you didn't mean to. We sat at her kitchen table, coffee steaming between us, the silence filling up the space where my courage should have been. I broke it. Have you ever felt like you married someone who memorized you better than you ever memorized yourself? She looked at me for a long moment before answering. You're not asking that for no reason. I forced a laugh. Just a rough week. She reached for a sugar packet, stirred it in slow circles. Careful, honey. Men who control everything usually have something to hide. I looked away. I've heard things, she continued, about the Voss Fund. Some families missing money, people too scared to ask questions out loud. Rumors, I muttered. Her voice dropped. Then let me tell you a fact. The last woman who started asking questions about your husband stopped coming to Sunday service. I don't know if she left town or if she was pushed. I nodded, more to myself than to her. I thanked her for the coffee, made up something about picking up Eli from a play date, and left before I could lose the mask I'd barely held in place. Back home, Graham's suitcase was missing from the hallway. He'd left for Houston, like he said. I waited an hour, just in case. Then I walked into his office and locked the door behind me. I started with the obvious, the bookshelf with all the awards and fake family photos. He'd kept everything too neat, too staged. But behind the row of albums marked Eli's first 5 years, I found something that didn't belong, a black USB drive. It was labeled Eli's School Project. I took it upstairs to my laptop and closed the door to our bedroom. My hands trembled as I plugged it in. I wasn't ready for what I saw. Dozens of files, spreadsheets, tax documents, signatures I recognized, but they weren't authentic. Offshore accounts, numbers that didn't match our life, but somehow did. Some under Graham's name, some under Eli's. All real. I didn't copy them. I didn't email them. I just stared at the screen like it could confess something to me. Then I pulled the drive out, shoved it into my purse, zipped it inside the side pocket, and whispered to myself, if I vanish, this goes with me. That night, while Eli colored in the living room, I sat beside him. He handed me a drawing of our house. It was all windows and sharp lines. He even drew the tree in the front yard with the swing we never used. But there were only 2 people in it, me and him. I asked softly, "Where's Daddy?" He didn't even look up. "He's always gone. He only talks when you're not around." The guilt was sharp, but behind it, something else was louder, clarity. I had thought I was shielding him from the worst of Graham, but what I was really doing was teaching him to be quiet, just like me. I went to bed late. I couldn't sleep. So I started doing what I never dared before. I recorded my thoughts, short voice memos hidden inside my notes app. I used the label meal planning just in case. If he finds this, it means I've failed, I whispered into the phone. But if I don't say it, I'll forget who I am. My voice sounded foreign, hollow, but real. I checked the purse before I fell asleep, made sure the USB was still there. It was, right where I left it. At 2:07 a.m., I woke up. The front door had opened. Graham wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and opened my purse. The drawer was still open. The purse was still unzipped. But the USB, it was gone. I stood frozen beside the dresser, my mind struggling to rewind the day like a security tape. Had I dropped it? No. I'd checked. Had I moved it without realizing? No. It was zipped inside, secure, hidden. And now it wasn't. Then I heard it, the low rumble of an engine outside, followed by the sharp thunk of a car door slamming. A pause. The gate creaked. And before my breath caught up with my thoughts, the front door opened. Thunder cracked overhead as Graham stepped inside, umbrella folded, the storm outside mimicking the one suddenly thundering in my chest. He set his keys on the console and looked at me, drenched, calm, too calm. "Why is my office drawer open?" His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I was tidying up," I replied, my words brittle. He chuckled, not amused, not kind. "You never clean my office, Celeste." My fingers tightened on the purse strap. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his shoes leaving faint watermarks on the floor. "You went looking for something, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is safer than truth. Sometimes it's a scream no one hears. He didn't touch me. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stared, long and hard, until the silence between us turned thick enough to suffocate. Then he smiled. "Let's have a drink." I followed him to the living room, each step echoing like I was walking deeper into a trap. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to me, and sat across the room. "Do you trust me?" he asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I forced a nod, just once. He gestured toward the massive window behind me, rain streaking down like fingers smearing truth. "People think glass houses are fragile," he mused, "but they're perfect. No shadows, no secrets." I stared back at him, letting my eyes do what my mouth couldn't. He blinked first. He took a sip, then leaned forward. "I've given you everything. A home, comfort, a name people recognize. You really want to jeopardize all that for, what? A USB drive?" He never said he had it. He didn't need to. "You rescued me from my life?" I said, my voice lower than I intended. "Or did you just rewrite it?" He smiled again, but the corners of his mouth didn't move far. "You don't want to go back to being nobody, do you?" Maybe he meant it as a threat. Maybe he thought it would work. "Maybe being nobody was safer," I said. His hand gripped the glass tighter. The room was too still. The only sound was the rain tapping harder now, as if nature itself was listening in. After a long, loaded pause, he stood, finishing his drink. "Try to get some rest," he said, his voice as even as ever. "You've been off lately." I waited until the shower started upstairs before I moved. I slipped into his office, not to snoop this time, but to survive. I opened his briefcase, praying for anything that could explain what I was trapped in. Inside, beneath a manila folder labeled Houston Phase 3, I found it. A printed list of names, dozens of them. People I knew, families from our neighborhood, parents from Eli's school, donors from our last gala. Next to some of their names were small check marks. Beside others, 2 words, pulled out. At the bottom of the page, scribbled in Graham's handwriting, were 5 words, "Keep quiet or lose everything." Judith's late husband's name was there too. I put the folder back exactly as I found it, closed the briefcase, and returned upstairs. Graham was still in the shower. The sound of water pounding tiles gave me a moment of fragile safety. I sat on the bed, heart racing, mind spinning. Judith's warning hadn't been gossip. It had been survival. Outside, the rain kept falling. The house glowed in soft lamplight, all glass and illusion. I walked to the kitchen, barefoot and shaking, and found the porcelain cup again, the one from that morning. The crack had widened, so thin, but running deep. I held it in my hands, my reflection warped in its surface. "Everything breaks quietly," I whispered, "before it shatters loud enough for the world to hear." My fear hadn't left me, but now it was walking beside something else, something sturdier. Resolve. I wasn't ready for war. But I was done playing the decoration in his glass castle. And if the house was going to break, I would be the one to throw the first stone. The next morning, I walked to Judith's house early. I didn't knock. Her porch light was still on, the way she always left it for guests. But when I rang the bell, no one came. I tried again. Nothing. Then I heard it. Static from a police radio. I turned and saw a patrol car parked just beyond her driveway. 2 officers stood in front of her door. One of them looked over at me and said, "Ma'am, we need you to step back." That was when I realized Graham's reach wasn't just about money. He didn't just buy power, he bought silence. And silence was fear's favorite disguise. The next morning, I walked past Judith's house again. The police tape was still up, fluttering gently in the wind like a warning too polite to shout. Her blinds were drawn tight, the porch light still glowing despite the rising sun. The place looked abandoned, but not empty, like it was holding its breath. Across the street, Mr. Callahan from 3 doors down was watering his lawn, though the ground was already wet from last night's rain. He glanced up, caught my eye, and immediately looked away. I crossed to his side of the street. "Did you hear what happened to Judith?" He hesitated, then offered a faint shrug. "She was old. Health things. Maybe." "That's not what I heard," I said quietly. He turned off the hose. "Sometimes people leave before things get worse." And with that, he went inside, shutting the door with more force than necessary. Back home, Graham was in his office, music drifting through the half-closed door. Something classical. He was humming, softly, tunelessly, as if everything outside our walls didn't exist. He glanced up when I passed by and said, "Tragic, isn't it?" "What is?" He sipped his coffee. "Judith. People disappear all the time." I didn't answer. I just walked past, straight to the kitchen. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I went to my contacts and froze. Judith's name was gone. I tried searching messages. Nothing. I opened my voice memos, the ones I'd hidden under generic titles like grocery list or school reminder. They were gone too. I checked my backup account. Empty. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. Someone had been inside my phone, not just snooping, scrubbing. When he walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, I didn't wait. "You touched my phone." He poured himself more coffee, then leaned against the counter, calm as always. "If you have nothing to hide," he said, "why does it matter?" I stared at him, not blinking. He smiled almost kindly and left the room. It mattered because it meant he knew. And worse, he wanted me to know that he knew. It wasn't about deleting data. It was about erasing me. I locked myself in the bathroom. The tile was cold beneath me as I slid to the floor, heart pounding in my ears. In the mirror, my reflection was pale, hollow. I barely recognized the woman staring back. A woman trapped between luxury and threat, status and silence. "He's going to destroy me," I whispered. I reached for my phone again, but not to search. This time I scrolled through photos of Eli, his gap-toothed smile, his drawings taped to the fridge, his birthday cake last month, lopsided, too much frosting, but perfect to him. That life, that boy, that's who I had to survive for. I can't let him grow up thinking this is love. I got up, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began to write. I didn't think. I just let the words come. It wasn't a confession, exactly. More like a letter to the world, in case I didn't wake up one morning. A map of the truth, just in case. I folded the paper and tucked it behind Eli's framed photo on my nightstand. My fingers lingered there, half hoping I'd never have to need it. That evening, as I was washing a dish that didn't need washing, a piece of paper slid under the front door. I didn't hear the footsteps, just the soft scratch of envelope on wood. I picked it up, no envelope, no signature, just 5 words scrawled in uneven ink. Judith talked too much. Be careful. The paper smelled faintly of cigarettes, the brand Graham only smoked when he was anxious. When things got messy, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I burned it in the sink. The ashes floated up, then dropped like black snowflakes, staining my fingers. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The house felt different now. Less like a home, more like a stage set no one was clapping for. Every creak in the floor, every whisper of the walls felt like a test. Was he watching me through some hidden camera? Was he listening? I sat alone in the living room, the only light coming from the oven clock. "They say silence protects you," I whispered, "but silence only feeds the monster that calls your name in every quiet room." Then I heard soft footsteps. Eli, his eyes still sleepy, stood in the doorway holding his stuffed bear. "Mom," he asked, rubbing one eye, "did you and Dad have another fight?" I forced a smile. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "No, sweetheart, we're just learning how to tell the truth again." He nodded and walked back to his room, the bear swinging gently from his hand. But deep down, I knew. We were running out of time. Later that night, I locked every door, checked every window twice. I turned off the lights, slipped into bed, and lay still, listening. At first, it was quiet, the usual silence, the kind that hums low and familiar. But then I heard it. Click, the back door, unlocking. This time, I hadn't touched it. The soft metallic click of the back door unlocking echoed louder than any scream. I froze. Eli's tiny breath warmed the inside of my arm as I held him tight against my chest, my other hand over his mouth. Not that he made a sound. He was used to silence. Through the narrow slats of the pantry door, I saw a shadow slide across the hallway. Tall, deliberate, unhurried. The weight of each step pressed into the floorboards like they belonged there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I whispered a name, not God's, just mine, just to remind myself I still existed. Then came the front door. A pause, a turn, then the click of it shutting again. He was gone. But the silence he left behind didn't feel like peace. It felt like a promise. At sunrise, I traced muddy footprints by the back entrance. They didn't belong to any of us. He had come in, walked through the house, and left, without a word, just to show he could. That morning, while Eli was busy coloring dinosaurs in the living room, I reached behind the tall blue vase Judith had given me years ago, the one Graham hated, said it was too tacky for a modern home. I slid a small black recorder into the hollow base, angled perfectly toward his office door. I pressed record, then leaned in and whispered, "If something happens to me, it's him, Graham Voss." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. For the first time, the fear felt useful. By noon, the house smelled of citrus and lavender, the kind of cover scent for a mask no one wants to admit they're wearing. Graham had invited 3 couples over for brunch. Investors, old college friends, people who wore money like it was an accent. I poured mimosas with a hand that didn't quite stop trembling, smiled, laughed at jokes that poked at women who shop too much and talk too little. "Your husband's hilarious," one of the wives said, touching my arm. "He told us he calls you his decoration. That's so sweet." They all laughed, and I did too, but not with my eyes. Inside me, something shifted. He hadn't just disrespected me. He'd trained others to do the same, like I was a prop. After they left, I found him on the patio, sipping his 3rd mimosa like he hadn't just played host to a performance. "You call me your decoration one more time," I said, setting down my glass, "and I'll become the fire that burns this house down." He didn't answer right away, just stared. Then, a blink, a twitch of his jaw, the smallest fracture in his polished facade. Fear. Finally, not mine. That night, I cooked dinner without speaking. He didn't offer to help, just turned up the volume on the news and scrolled through his phone. The silence between us stretched across the room like barbed wire. After dinner, he stormed into his office and slammed the door. The walls shook. So did a picture frame. I heard something fall. Then came the yelling. Not words, just raw fury, noise, rage released without form. I didn't move. I didn't run. Instead, I walked calmly to the hallway table, picked up my phone, opened the recording app, pressed the button. "Say it again, Graham," I said, my voice flat. "Say what I am." The office door burst open. He stood there, chest heaving, his expression somewhere between shock and threat. "You wouldn't dare." But I didn't flinch. I didn't stop recording. I held his gaze like I had nothing left to lose, because maybe I didn't. He took a step toward me, then another, and just when I thought he might reach for the phone, he turned and left. No apology, no explanation, just the sound of our bedroom door slamming shut. Later, when the house settled into that hollow quiet again, I lay awake on the couch, the faint glow of my phone screen lighting the ceiling. I listened to the recording, his tone, his threats, the underlying venom behind every syllable. I didn't cry. Instead, I uploaded it to a cloud account Graham would never think to search. I labeled the folder Eli's Drawings. Inside, I created subfolders, one for voice files, one for photos, one marked Judith. Evidence. "You used our son's name to steal their futures," I whispered. "I'll use it to take yours back." It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Just before dawn, I woke to the faint buzz of a text, unknown number. "We heard what you recorded. Delete it, or you'll end up like Judith." I didn't move for a full minute. I just stared at the screen. Then I got up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water with hands that no longer shook. That was the moment I knew. Graham wasn't acting alone. And I wasn't fighting one man. I was fighting an entire machine. And yet, as I merged onto the highway just before dawn, leaving behind the glass and steel lie I once called home, the wheels humming beneath me didn't sound like surrender. They sounded like freedom. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't check my phone. I just drove. Eli had spent the night at my sister Dana's under the innocent guise of a surprise weekend. I hadn't told her the truth. I couldn't, not yet. She thought I just needed a break. I let her believe it. At a red light near a gas station, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror. A dark SUV, the same make as Graham's. My heart stuttered, but when I looked again, it was gone. "He doesn't know yet," I whispered. "He can't." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Graham always knew. That was his gift, or his sickness. The courthouse downtown didn't look like the place where lives unravel. It was clean, bland, beige walls, linoleum floors, and vending machines humming near the entrance. But as I walked in, clutching a folder close to my chest, it felt like walking into a storm shelter. Detective Avery Holt met me on the second floor, in a quiet interview room that smelled faintly of printer ink and old coffee. She looked exactly as I hoped. Composed, mid-50s, steel gray hair tucked into a low bun, eyes sharp but not unkind. She offered me water. I shook my head. I handed her the folder. Screenshots, voice memos, financial records. A copy of the recorder file. She flipped through the pages slowly, her face unreadable. Then she looked up. "If what you're saying is true, Mrs. Marlowe," she said carefully, "this isn't just marital deception, it's fraud, large-scale, federal." I nodded, my voice low. "He used our son's name to bury money, offshore accounts, ghost donors. It's not business, it's blood money." Avery set down the folder and folded her hands. "We'll open a quiet investigation. No subpoenas yet, nothing loud, but once he gets wind of it..." I finished her sentence for her. "It's war." She didn't disagree. Outside, the wind had picked up. I made it back to the car, legs a little shaky, hands cold despite the heat. I hadn't even pulled out of the parking lot when my phone rang. Unknown number. I should have let it go to voicemail, but instinct made me swipe. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You should have stayed home, Celeste. You never did understand how fragile things can be." Then, click. Just like that, he was gone. Seconds later, an email pinged. The subject line, Property Division Proposal. My hands trembled as I opened the attachment. Line by line, I watched my name disappear from every property, every fund, every asset, like I'd never existed. He was already scrubbing me out, but scrubbing a name didn't erase a memory, or a paper trail, or a voice recording. Sitting in the car, staring at nothing, Avery's words echoed, back to me. Sometimes the best evidence isn't hidden. It's right where they think you'll never look. And I remembered. Eli's old tablet, the one Graham insisted we keep for school projects. It was always plugged in, syncing automatically. I pulled it from the glove compartment and powered it on. The home screen was still cluttered with cartoon apps and weather widgets. I opened the cloud storage linked to the account. One folder stood out. Eli Fund Transfers. He didn't even try to hide it. Inside were dozens of files. Spreadsheets, documents, PDF contracts, names, dollar amounts, all tied to Graham's investment fund. Wire transfers from shell corporations, routing numbers to foreign banks, and worst of all, a scanned signature labeled Judith Lang, verified. My stomach turned. She didn't stand a chance. I held the tablet against my chest and exhaled. Shaky, not from fear, but from fury. You hid it where innocence lived, I whispered, but I found it. That night, I checked into a roadside motel just off Highway 31, the kind of place that didn't ask questions if you paid in cash and kept your head down. The room smelled like cleaning spray and old cigarettes. I didn't care. I set up my laptop, copied the folder twice. One version was saved to a password-protected drive. The second, I encrypted and sent in an email to Avery's secure server. I included a statement for the DA, typed, signed, time-stamped. I printed a hard copy, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it from the gas station down the road. Then, for the first time in years, I slept without a chair wedged under the doorknob. No locked drawers, no backup plans. I just slept. And before I drifted off, I whispered to myself, he controlled everything, the house, the money, my silence. But not this, not the truth. At 3:07 a.m., I woke to headlights slicing through the curtains. I sat up fast. Outside, a silhouette stepped out of the car, broad shoulders, stiff posture, familiar gait. Graham. But this time I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't panic. I just stood up, quietly, and moved to the center of the room. He'd found me. But I wasn't the one trapped anymore. When the knock finally came, it wasn't loud. It was soft, deliberate, as if he wanted me to know he was calm, in control. I stood there in the dim motel room, the air thick with humidity and quiet resolve. My fingers brushed the nightstand where I had slid my phone beneath, already recording. Every second counted now. I opened the door. Graham stood there, rain-soaked, suit wrinkled, jaw tight. His eyes locked on mine with a sickening calm. "You've embarrassed me," he said, voice low. "No," I replied, stepping back but holding my ground. "You did that all by yourself." He walked in slowly, like he still believed the room, or me, belonged to him. He glanced around, dismissing the cheap wallpaper and worn carpet like they insulted his presence. "You don't understand how the world works, Celeste. You need protection, my protection." I didn't flinch. "Your protection ruins people," I said quietly. He shut the door behind him. The silence stretched until it felt like something you could trip over. He slammed his palm against the small table, the lamp wobbling from the force. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he snapped. "Do you think anyone will believe your little drama? You don't have proof. You have paranoia. You're unstable." My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. "I don't need them to believe me," I said. "I just need them to hear you." I tilted my head toward the nightstand, just enough to mark the spot in my memory. He didn't catch it. He was too busy unraveling, too busy enjoying the sound of his own destruction. He cursed, threw accusations, called me ungrateful, delusional. And I let him talk. Every word, a confession, every insult. Another brick pulled from the foundation he thought was indestructible. It wasn't until my face changed, when I stopped reacting, stopped blinking, that he finally paused. He squinted at me, something shifting behind his eyes. "You're recording this," he said slowly. I didn't deny it. I didn't nod either. I just met his gaze. "You once called me your decoration," I said. "You forgot. Decorations are what people look at when they want to see the truth." He lunged. I turned. We collided by the door. His arm swung wildly and hit the nightstand. The phone skidded across the floor, screen still lit, audio still rolling. "Give it to me," he shouted, grabbing at my arm. "You'll have to kill me first," I hissed. The struggle didn't last long. He shoved me against the wall, then stopped. His breathing was ragged. Something in him, maybe the last trace of calculation, realized he had gone too far. And it was all recorded. Morning broke with gray clouds and coffee steam. I sat across from Detective Avery in a diner just off Route 12, hands wrapped around the warm cup. She didn't ask questions at first, just inserted the headphones and listened. When she took them off, her voice was quiet. "It's all here." I nodded. I didn't smile. That afternoon, the clip leaked. It wasn't from me, not directly. But somehow it made its way to the press. An anonymous email. By 2:00 p.m., it was everywhere. Real estate fraud, CEO under investigation after shocking recording. News anchors dissected every word. Twitter exploded. Neighbors who once turned away now glued themselves to the TV. The same women who called me the lucky one or his trophy whispered my name with awe. Some even reached out. One message read, "I saw what you did. I wish I'd been that brave." I didn't respond. I just read it again and again, like a balm. Driving back to the motel, I didn't play music. I didn't need noise. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a soaked world and the scent of resolution. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, engine off. The windshield wipers clicked once, then stopped. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was bruised, physically, emotionally, but there was something new in my eyes. Clarity. "He built a world on silence," I whispered. "I tore it down with the truth." That night, I watched the news alone. His mugshot flickered across the screen. Words like embezzlement, domestic abuse, and financial misconduct wrapped around his name like chains. Justice was slow, but it was coming. Still, I didn't celebrate. Because I knew stories like ours never ended clean. There was always one more call, one more twist, and sure enough, as midnight turned to morning, the motel phone rang. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. "Mom?" It was Eli. His voice came through the line like sunlight after a storm, hesitant, unsure, but real. "Mom?" he said again, softer this time. I swallowed. My heart had braced for everything that could come next. Reporters, lawyers, even more threats. But not him. "I'm here," I said, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Are you okay?" There was a pause. "Yeah, Aunt Jules let me stay up. She said you'd call." Tears pushed up behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "I missed you." "I miss you too. When are you coming back?" I looked out at the empty street beyond the motel window. The sky had started to fade from deep blue to gray. "Soon," I said. "Very soon." By mid-morning, we were at the park. Eli ran toward the swings like he'd been waiting days to feel wind in his hair. I sat on a bench nearby, watching him kick higher and higher. The world looked the same. Trees, strollers, joggers passing by. But something had shifted. The way people glanced at me now, then turned away, or gave a quick nod, or whispered behind their coffee cups. Some avoided my eyes. Others looked like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. In this town, I thought, they don't forgive easily, but they never forget courage either. Around noon, my phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. "Detective Holt," I answered. Her voice was steady, clipped, but not cold. "He agreed to the plea deal this morning." I blinked. "He did?" "Full restitution, repayment to every name on the list. The judge made it part of the condition for keeping the trial sealed." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "He's signing it right now," she added. I imagined the courtroom. Graham in a stiff suit, wrists in cuffs, pen shaking slightly as he scrawled his name over document after document. Every dollar, every lie, unraveled on paper. He built a life with signatures, and now, one by one, he was signing it away. That evening, after dropping Eli off with Jules for the night, I drove downtown. The courthouse lights glowed faint against the dusk. I didn't go in, just stood outside, near the glass wall that looked into the holding area. And there he was. Graham sat alone on a metal bench, thinner than I remembered, suit collar sagging slightly. He looked up, and for the first time in years, he didn't smile, didn't perform. There was no fury in his eyes, just the look of a man who finally understood that the game was over. He mouthed something. "You ruined me." I stepped closer to the glass. "No," I said quietly. "You built your own ruin. I just opened the window." He didn't respond, just looked away. The house was quiet when I returned. I stepped into the kitchen, and there it was, the porcelain cup. It sat on the counter like it had always belonged there, but now it bore golden veins where it had once been shattered. Eli patted in behind me, rubbing his eyes. "I fixed it," he said. "With glue and the stuff Aunt Jules gave me. It's stronger now." I ran a finger over the cracks. The gold shimmered faintly under the overhead light. "That's what happens when you stop pretending things aren't broken," I murmured. We stood there for a moment. No music, no news, just a quiet kitchen and the smell of something baking down the street. Later that night, I sat by the window. The neighborhood was still. Porches lit, curtains drawn. The same silence that used to press in around me now felt earned. Not the hush of fear, not the weight of secrets. Just space. "Silence isn't what he gave me," I whispered into my phone's recorder. "It's what I reclaimed." I hit save and uploaded the file to a women's forum. Anonymous, no name, no tags. Just my voice and the truth. "My name is Celeste Marlowe. I was his decoration. Now I'm my own foundation." I set the phone down, stood, and walked into Eli's room. He was curled up under the quilt, bare tucked beneath his chin. I leaned over, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You can always speak the truth, even if it shakes your voice," I said. His eyes fluttered open. "Mom, I'm here, baby." "Are we safe now?" I hesitated, then nodded. "We're getting there, one day at a time." I turned off the light, pulled the door gently behind me. Just as I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "Thank you for what you did. He hurt others too. You weren't alone." I stood still for a long moment, reading the words again and again. Then I closed my eyes, let out a slow breath, and whispered, "I know, none of us ever were.